So the Better Food Index is a comprehensive assessment of the largest companies in the UK food system, both the food and the drink companies. And I suppose the point of the index is to shine a light on where these companies are currently performing, but also where they're aiming to be in 10, 15, 20 years' time. So the way that we do that is we look at what they say they're doing, which is our talk pillar, and what they are actually doing, which is the walk. And this is divided into a series of different areas. So we've got environment, social impact, nutrition, affordability, and financial sustainability. So it really is a very comprehensive understanding of what sustainability is. And we approach it from that direction because it is complicated. It's hard to know who's doing well. And so using public data predominantly, we are trying to identify who's at the top and who's at the bottom.
So who is at the top and who's at the bottom? Give us that.
Yeah, so at the top is Cranswick. So they are a predominantly own label producer in the UK. They make meat, deli, antipasti. You've probably eaten their foods, but you didn't even know that they were the ones behind it. And they're there predominantly because they're very good at reporting. They are the most transparent company in the index. And on their reporting, they've got really good statistics on emissions and environment, which is a really key part of our assessment. So Cranswick are at the top this year. Second is Nestlé. They were top last year. And so Nestlé, again, transparent, a large multinational company. We would kind of expect that. But they do perform very well across environment, social impact metrics. And then finally, we have Britvic. They are a drinks producer. They make Robinson squash. Here we go. And they've improved quite a lot since last year, so they're up 10 places. And that is because, again, they're very transparent. So hopefully what you're hearing here is that when you report good data, you are rewarded. And that is what our index does.
And shall we just look at the bottom?
Sure thing. So at the bottom, if we go to the next slide, we have Pladis UK and Ireland. They're behind McVitie's Digestives. They are at the bottom here, alongside Muller and Safina UK. Safina UK is a pork and seafood producer. They're owned by a Canadian company. And these companies are really at the bottom, not because they are awful in every part of our index. As you can see, even Pladis UK, quite good on social impact. They're at the bottom predominantly because there's a lack of reporting, and where it really matters, they are falling down. And so I suppose what these rankings actually mean, a ranking, an index could be quite reductive, who's top, who's bottom, what does it all mean? And I suppose what we're trying to say is that it's really difficult to be a sustainable business across every single aspect of an operation. And so we recognise that, we empathise with it, but that's kind of what we're seeing this year.
If a company comes top, Maddie, what does that say about the company? So does it say primarily that they've been very transparent? I mean, what's the sort of key understanding thing we should take away?
Yeah, so I think transparency is probably the most important part of our index. So Cranswick is the most transparent company across the board. And so they are there for that, predominantly for that reason, but they do perform very well across environment and the other metrics, as we can see in the pillars.
It really is remarkable that a company that makes sausages has come top for transparency. It's not something you associate with sausage making. Okay, Will Mower, who's data scientist at Tortoise. The companies, as I understand it, have pretty low scores overall. Yes, what does that tell us?
So we've got to be quite careful when we look at the scores explicitly because there's a lot going on there. And so we built the index not with a sort of an ideal food company. We've taken all the food companies and they're compared to each other, and that's where that score comes from. And so to put it into context a little bit, 100 would be a company that scores that is completely transparent, as in they report on every indicator, every metric we think is applicable to them.
Yeah.
And they would top every single metric. So they would be the best company. So there would only be able to be one company with a score of 100. Realistically, there are sort of trade-offs that come with, as Maddie spoke about, with sort of performing sustainably in every facet.
Yeah.
So we see that it's actually really challenging to do well on all of them. And the low scores, if you've got a keen eye, you'll see they'll have changed since last year. And that's,
so you say a perfect score is virtually impossible?
Yeah. pretty much.
Okay. All right.
But the scores are not there to go like there's 77 more sort of points to go for the company.
Yeah.
Is to put it into perspective, and that's why we want to look specifically at the rankings.
Yeah.
We can glean some information from the scores, notably that they're reasonably compact and that the companies are sort of, there isn't that much room to play with.
When you say reasonably compact, so if you sort of plot them on a graph, they cluster together, is that what you mean? Or,
yeah, so the majority of the companies are between sort of like 20 and 30.
Okay.
And in large part that is because of transparency.
Okay.
But so that plays a huge role in the scores.
Okay,
Yeah.
and well, this is obviously the second iteration of this index. Could you just give us a sense of what's changed between the first and second? Where have we seen progress this year in this version of the index?
So I think the main thing we've seen is an increase in Scope 3 reporting.
Okay.
So now, if I remember correctly, I think 26 companies report some form of Scope 3 emissions.
Because this is a knowledgeable room, I'm assuming everybody knows
Yeah,
what Scope 3
sorry.
emissions means.
So
they?
Scope 3,
Anyone who doesn't know is too afraid to admit it, obviously. So, yeah.
but we can clarify that. I wonder. It's sort of anything direct that's not directly in your control.
So it's across your whole
across
supply
your whole
chain, value chain.
operations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really challenging to report that. And so that's where we see a disparity between the Scope 1 and 2 emissions and the Scope 3 emissions. So while some companies, they'll report, let's say, 80,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent Scope 1 and 2 emissions, they'll report 50 tonnes of Scope 3, which is really unrealistic, but it's really challenging. So whilst it's challenging, that's sort of quite a misleading number. So we've noticed that there are still quite a significant proportion of companies who do this underreporting Scope 3 emissions. But we take that into consideration with our scoring. We don't score companies worse for higher Scope 3 emissions because of the challenges around that.
Thanks for watching that clip. If you'd like to see the full interview, just click here. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like to join us live in the newsroom, head to tortoisemedia.com/book.